Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our training this morning. My name is Kristen Solomon. I am one of the vice chairs of the Florida Bar's Legal Needs of Children committees, and we welcome you to our training this morning on leveraging multiple funding sources and agency collaboration for youth with complex needs. And we thought this would be a wonderful training because many of us deal with youth that are involved in multiple systems, both the Florida dependency system and the Florida delinquency system, and even involved with the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, and they receive multiple funding sources for their services. So today we are very excited to have two presenters from the Florida Department of Children and Families. Joelle Aboitis is the Fifth Circuit Community Development Administrator for the Florida Department of Children and Families. She's an attorney who received her JD and MBA from Stetson University College of Law. She started her legal career as a staff attorney for the Guardian Ad Litem program in Orange County, Florida. She joined the Florida Department of Children and Families in 2004 with Children's Legal Services and served as the supervising attorney from 2007 until 2013 when she assumed her current position. She has a passion for serving children and child welfare and developing relationships and collaborating with agency partners to increase protective factors and resiliency for children and families in the community. Christy Gillis is the Circuit 7 Community Development Administrator for the Florida Department of Children and Families. Christy is a graduate of psychology from the University of Central Florida. She has over 25 years of experience in the social services field. She's worked in the anti-trafficking field, Medicaid health plan, Florida Department of Juvenile Justice, behavioral health, child abuse prevention, and child welfare. She believes that there is no single one approach that can be used to help an individual in their recovery, and every individual is unique. She believes that with the right support, resources, and encouragement, that people have the strength and ability to thrive. We are very grateful that they're both here to talk to us today about how we as practitioners can help navigate these complex systems for our youth and our families that cross multiple agencies in their cases. So this morning, as I'm going to turn it over to Joelle and Christy, I just wanted to remind everybody to please mute your lines. And if you have questions this morning, you can put them in the chat. And at the end, as time permits, we will take those questions. This presentation is being recorded and it will be on the Florida Bar's website on the Legal Needs of Children Committee's site for training that you can go back and refer to it, as well as several attachments that the presenters will refer to this morning will be available along with the recording of this presentation. You do receive 2 CLE credit hours for today, so thank you again for joining us. And once you get the link or once it's posted, please share it with your colleagues if they were unable to join us today. So thank you so much. And at this time, I will turn it over to Joelle and Christy.
Good morning. Thank you again so much for attending this training today. I'm going to go briefly over the agenda. And while I do that, there is a link to a Google Classroom. You'll see that QR code right there. And then with the password there at the bottom, we have quite a few resources that are in that Google Classroom. We know that everything moves quite quickly and information can change quickly. So in that Google Classroom information, updated information is placed, and then there's also resources that are shared for individuals and for families. So I just want to state that first, and then so you have some time. I believe you may have to have a Google account in order to access it, but it has a lot of great information. So before today's agenda, we're going to include a case example of Jodie Foster and looking at her case from beginning to end and how all of this intertwines with each other. Discussion on social determinants of health. We're also going to look at data and findings related to lockout youth, and those are those youth that the parent may not pick up from a juvenile justice facility or a Baker Act facility. Opportunities for teamings or MDT staffings. We're going to discuss dually involved youth, and again, those lockout diversions, understanding Medicaid funds, as well as local review teams. And as stated before, then we'll have some time for some Q&A. Next slide, please. So we are going to do a welcome poll. We'll put this up there. So if you just scan that QR code and let us know what best describes your role. And we'll leave it up there for just a minute, just so that we have an understanding of where everyone is. So if you click the QR code, it'll allow you to do your choice. And again, it just kind of lets us know the individuals that we're training.
And just to be forewarned, we do have a couple of these in the session today. So if you have access to your phone and are in a safe position to do so, to scan the QR code with regard to participating, that's how you participate. We'll go ahead and move on to the slides. We'll have a couple other polls in there. We'll try them out, and hopefully they'll work a little better for us. So a lot of GAL folks.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Jody Foster. So Jody's a 4-year-old. Mom is a single mom. She has a full-time job before Jody was born, and she works when she is able. Mom has given Jody to the grandmother a couple of various weeks so she can go out with friends. Jody had an abuse report called when she was 3 years old, and a daycare referral was made. She only stayed in the daycare for 6 months. Mom had used various drugs since high school, and that has been increasing lately. Mom applied for food stamps and Medicaid. So as I stated before, we're going to look at Jody's life from, as you can see, a very young age until she's older, which is sometimes cases that we see as the department may be involved in their life a multitude of times throughout their life to try to help with services. So again, looking at the social determinants of health. So let's think back to Jody just then. Social determinants of health is the conditions of the social, economic, and physical environments in which we live, work, and play, worship, and age that affect our health and the health of the community. So we look at education and educational access and quality, and that's where an individual through their life is able to receive, be self-sufficient. We look at economic stability. We also look at healthcare access and quality, and then neighborhood and the neighborhood and the environment, and that is a relation to safety, and then social and community contacts. And when we're looking at these cases, we take all of that into effect in how we are able to assist families. And as you can see, here are the various state agencies that fall into social determinants of health and where they fall into social determinants of health. So you may see the Department of Health, and that has to do with healthcare quality, healthcare access, if they are able to assist a family. You see the guardian ad litem in there about at the bottom. And the guardian ad litem's office may be involved at any point in time. I know if there's some judiciary support, it could be from birth up until age 18 and beyond. You'll see Agency for Persons with Disabilities. There is support there for specialized populations, Department of Children and Families. Again, we're a large agency, so you could see support through economic self-services, self-sufficiency, substance abuse, mental health, as well as the family safety services. But as you can see, there's where those state agencies fall. And then this is the child serving state agencies across a life course. So for example, Early Learning Coalition, as you can see, stops because they stop at a certain age, the early childhood, but yet Department of Education is early childhood all the way up into adulthood. Someone can stay within the school system or Department of Education up through college. Agency for Persons with Disabilities, as you can see, is from young until they get much older. Same with Department of Children and Families. We can be involved at any point in a child's life as well as an adult's life. Guardian ad litem same thing, Department of Juvenile Justice, Department of Health, and really looking at care quality related to medical health. There's substance abuse, mental health supports, childbirth. So they can be involved in the life of an individual, as well as Agency for Healthcare Administration. So it just helps paint a picture of how we all are able to work together with an individual and with a family from prenatal all the way to adulthood. So we come back to Jodie Foster, and let's think about what we just talked about with those state agencies, social determinants of health, and how they all intertwine. We received an abuse intake in January. The mother had a history of drug abuse. She had tested positive for cocaine in the past. It is unknown if she's currently using drugs. There are concerns for the mother and that the mother and children move very frequently and live with different men that the mother dates. The uncle is living with the family, and the child told the mother that the uncle was touching her privates. The mother did not believe the child. So that was in January. Then we move on to March. There's another abuse intake. Biological mother has a history of substance abuse and unaddressed mental health needs. Mom and boyfriend were in a physical altercation about the care of the child. The mother threatened to harm herself and her child, and the mother was Baker acted. We received another report in December. Jodie has bruises on her thighs, forearms, and forehead. The parents do not have any explanation for the bruises, and the child wears long shirts to hide the bruises. And so we looked at those. We looked at that case, and this was a summary of the outcomes of those investigations. There were mixed findings, meaning they could have been not substantiated. There wasn't a clear picture. There were services that were referred to. Mom was referred to counseling. The child was referred to counseling. Mom was referred to mental health services. But after the case was closed, it was unknown if there was follow through, and the outcomes were not documented in the case. And often, so when we talk about when we're working with families, you want to know your inventory of resources, inventory of who you are able to connect families with. Every community is different, and the resources that they have are very different. And so here are some resources that are available statewide, just so that you have that. But so we have Hope Florida, where families can receive assistance through Hope Florida, as well as how Hope Florida is embedded into many other state agencies to help families in need. Substance abuse, mental health services. There's United Way, findhelp.org. Agency for Persons with Disabilities has resources. SAMHSA, if you're looking for treatment, Department of Juvenile Justice, and Department of Corrections. It's very good to have these resources, but sometimes families can get very frustrated if they're handed a pamphlet and say, here, call this person, or here, you can look for resources yourself, because those families are in crisis, and picking up those phone numbers and calling someone. General guides are helpful, but families often become frustrated if they'll often hear, well, this organization isn't here anymore, although it was on the resource guide. They don't provide services in my area. The provider doesn't take my insurance. So while resources are good, we have found better ways to be able to connect individuals with supports. Next slide. So we're going to look at Jodie again at 10 years old. Jodie continues to get abuse reports and is removed and placed with the grandmother. Mom does not complete the dependency case plan and task, and the case is closed out to permanent guardianship with the grandmother. So Department of Children and Families did a root cause analysis around like what we spoke about earlier with those lockout youth. And we looked at random cases throughout the state of Florida on those lockout youth, and looking at if there was opportunities for prevention. The case study overview was children ages 13 to 17, investigations that had been closed between January 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2021. And the removal reasons were selected were abandonment, caregiver unable to cope, and the child was placed in foster care. What we saw is there was a spike at the age of 14. That's when children were entering the foster care system because of the lockouts. We wanted to go back and look at all of those touch points and seeing, when were we able to intervene? How are we able to intervene better to be able to do some direct connections to services? What were those missed opportunities? In looking at those cases, we also included looking at when they were involved with Department of Juvenile Justice. What was their schooling? Were they in regular classes? Were they in ESC classes? Did they move around a lot? Was there testing that was done? And again, findings that we had, parents had expressed an inability to cope with the child's behaviors. There was a common thread of lack of community respite placements or appropriate services for children and families that are in crisis. It was reported families in crisis did not have a concrete support network. Families were being denied by Medicaid services, and then a lack of services and support for those children in crisis that met the need for that individual child and that family, and often long wait lists for targeted case management. So that was looking at, again, those lockout cases and those children that entered the foster care system because the parents did not pick them up from either a Baker Act facility or a DJJ type program or some other type program. So again, we wanted to look at service connection and looked at those issues and then those desired goals. Providers and families often have trouble connecting families to concrete services and supports when families are in crisis. And again, that could be at a lockout, it could be at a Baker Act. And this is because of due to lack of behavioral health and mental health support and service navigation. So we wanted to look at creating a multidisciplinary team that would be able to identify champions for children and work toward getting upstream and looking at children ages 6 through 12 and how are we able to better connect them to services to change their trajectory. We wanted to advocate for connecting them to those community-based services and prevent them from going deeper into the system, whether it was a Baker Act, it could be, some of you are familiar with SIP, which is a statewide inpatient psychiatric program, a mental health residential program, as well as entry into the juvenile justice and the child welfare system. And we wanted to include stabilization short-term for the family, looking at that holistic approach for the family to meet their needs. Once we get them out of crisis, how do we move them, look at those bigger issues with family and decrease utilization of deep end services and increase teaming opportunities. When we were looking at these cases, so often individuals were operating in silos with family that they weren't aware of opportunities to be able to work together in these teaming models. Next slide, please. So again, the trajectory for multi-systems youth, and this includes our dually involved youth, that is youth that are involved with Department of Juvenile Justice and Department of Children and Families. And so we wanted to build a teaming component for multi-systems youth. When we look at these youth that are involved in multi-systems, trends that we see, many experience out-of-home placement. They see the children have a decrease in educational success. Those youth involved in multi-systems may have experienced significant trauma. They're more likely to experience homelessness after the age of 18, more likely to experience unemployment and or earn a low wage after the age of 18, and more likely to have documented mental health and substance abuse problems and struggle with the use of alcohol and or other drugs. So in the children that you are representing or working with, think about those cases and think about those youth that are involved in multiple systems and how much more complex it is, and how it can be a struggle to be able to connect them to proper services and supports. So next, we're going back to Jody. So again, we're building on, when we're looking at Jody, we're building on the things that we are talking about on some of the earlier slides. So now Jody is 11 years old. Now Jody has a trauma history by the maternal biological uncle, who is now currently in prison. He was later convicted and sent to prison as a result of what had happened to Jody. Jody was removed from mom's care and placed in relative care. When Jody was 9 years old, DCF received a child-on-child special conditions case. Jody was molested by her biological brother while on a visit at the biological mom's home. Jody was referred to counseling and play therapy. When Jody was in 4th grade, she was evaluated by the school and determined to be an ESE student, and an IEP was developed. In her classification, in her IEP was SLD, specific learning disability. Also, at 11 years old, there was recently a parent needs assistance call to the hotline. And that's where a caregiver can call the hotline and request for help, support, and services. The grandmother is refusing to continue to care for Jody because she feels like Jody is a threat to her and her husband. Grandma states that Jody has threatened to kill her and her husband. Jody was supposed to be in respite visit with an adult cousin, but the cousin was not willing to take care of her, so she dropped Jody back off with the biological mom. Jody has been staying with her biological mom for 2 days, who has mental health issues, is not able to care for her. DCF went out and speak with the family, and Jody then was returned to her grandmother. So as you can see, Jody continues to be involved with Department of Children and Families throughout her life and being able to connect her with services. Now Jody is also going deeper into the school system now that she has an IEP for her specific learning disability. So we're starting to get a better picture of Jody and what her needs are. So we want to, again, look at addressing needs of complex youth and strengthening caregiver supports. So we want to look at timely service navigation, linking and coordinating with services to assist them with accessing and connecting with services before the family gets into crisis stage. So again, identifying those opportunities to get upstream before the family is in crisis. We want to be able to overcome challenges and accessing in-home and out-of-home respite services to support family during the transition from residential to community care, which it could be from a Baker Act facility back into the community. It could be from a SIP program back into the community, or where that family is in crisis and then back into the community. And looking at how do we access intensive wraparound mental health and behavioral health services to address the parent-child relationship before and during the transition from residential care. Having worked in the mental health realm for over 25 years, being able to tell, talk with families, talk with individuals when someone goes to residential care, if there are core issues going on at home, it's not going to fix home. So you can stabilize someone in some sort of treatment program, whether it's a Baker Act facility, even a respite type program. But if things aren't changing at home, then likely you're going to enter that cycle again and again. So we really need to listen to families and what they need, and making sure that we're connecting them to the right services and supports. Okay, now Jody is 13 years old. We received the first caregiver unavailable special conditions report. Grandma brought Jody to a youth shelter for respite care. Grandma was informed she must come pick up Jody, but the grandmother is refusing. The local youth shelter is not will not accept Jody because they're aware of her behavioral issues. So as you can hear, Jody's behaviors are starting to escalate. Since she was our last time we talked to her, when she was 9 and when she was 7 years old. So Jody definitely has some unmet needs. We received a second caregiver unavailable call for special conditions. Jody is currently at school, not feeling well. There were no arrangements made for Jody once she was released from school. Jody was staying at a runaway youth shelter, but she cannot return there after school because she was being kicked out and they don't have enough staff to help cover her. The legal guardian said she can't take her anymore and asked mother if she can leave Jody with her, and the mother agreed to allow her to stay. The legal guardian wants to give up her custody rights. The legal guardian stating she's tired of Jody lying to everyone and Jody is too much to deal with. And please don't forget that Jody was closed out to permanent guardianship under the dependency system. So now an abandonment charge has been added since the legal guardian was not willing to receive the child in her home and gave up on her due to the child's behaviors and being discharged from respite. Jody was then sheltered again and placed into the foster care system. So again, looking at this case, there were some missed opportunities with Jody where Jody was acting out and asking for help, and even the caregiver was asking for help as it relates to Jody. And Jody still had some traumatic events that occurred with her since the age of 3 up until the age of 13. The child on child that came in, again, looking at the uncle when she was molested, mom did not believe that had happened to her. And so Jody's behaviors continued to escalate up until the age of 13 that we were able to look at. So we want to share information about dually involved youth and statewide collaboration. And again, that is talking about those youth that are involved with the Department of Juvenile Justice as well as the Department of Children and Families. So there's a lot of work that's being done behind the scenes to be able to better connect individuals to support services and making sure that we are all moving in the right direction with helping these youth with complex needs. We have ongoing monthly cross-agency meetings to look at dually involved youth. We have interagency collaboration trainings, again, understanding that each system can be very complex and how can we help navigate that for a family. And then we look at development and implementation of policy, procedures, and protocol as it relates to dually involved youth so that we can work closer together and hopefully be able to change the trajectory for some of these youth that are involved with a multitude of systems. So now we're going to talk about diversion of lockout situations. So going back to the slide a little bit ago, we talked about the average age of a lockout is at the age of 14. And most of the times when we're starting to look at these cases, you can start to see how the case is moving up in intensity and the family is more and more in crisis. So what is a lockout situation? A lockout is whenever a youth is being released from, it could be a crisis center, a residential program, either mental health or a DJJ residential program, or a detention center, and the parent or guardian is not willing to have them come back home, not willing to pick them up, or they do not have a safe place to return to. And there is collaboration between Department of Juvenile Justice and Department of Children and Families that led to diversionary measures to try to prevent these lockout type situation. This includes early identification and communication between lockouts. So we do trainings between both agencies and enhanced trainings on service navigation and collaboration and working to alert each agency, and so that we can respond in a process of implementing and identifying potential lockouts and looking at what services would be available to prevent that lockout from occurring. We have early interagency service planning. So using those lockout and prevention type staffing to provide concrete services, linkage and coordination to services and youth and caregivers to prevent that lockout across the systems of care. And it doesn't matter if it is DCF is the first one to be notified, or if it's DJJ is the first one to be notified as a potential lockout. We work collaboratively together to be able to, as soon as we know that it's a lockout type situation, to be able to come together to be able to help that family. And then we're also and we'll be going more into detail about our local review teams and state review teams. I don't know if any of you all have ever participated in those. That might be something else to put in the chat. Has anyone heard of, or are they aware of local review teams or state review teams? If you can add that into the chat. Okay. So children and family with complex needs can be staffed at a local review team. We also and every area across the state has a local review team. We also have access to a state review team if we're not able to address those needs at a local level, that can discuss those cases and help support those children with individual needs. And we'll go into, again, more detail of how local review teams have started as it relates to the Children's Cabinet, and go into more detail and share information about local review teams.
Thank you, Christy. I'm going to go ahead and stop the slide share for just a second. I want to try to get rid of the annotated stuff on there. Give me 1 second to reshare the screen, and then we'll continue on with the presentation. So like Christy was talking about, local review teams, they started back in 2012 or so. They derived out of the Florida Children's Cabinet. So the leaders of our state child serving agencies, they got together and they signed an agreement that basically stated, if we have a child in common that has complex needs, that we would go ahead and get together and discuss those children. So very important concept of service planning holistically for the family. And we know that children often cross over multiple systems. It's a very low threshold for that. If they're in school, they're a multi-agency youth, right? So they might be in school, they might have Medicaid, they might be involved with DCF, they might be involved with DJJ, whoever else they're involved with. The idea is to pull folks and representation from each of those state agencies together to meet and discuss the child's needs, to plan for that child holistically. And so we have been doing that work for now about 12 years or so. And when we first started back in the early days, it was really a matter of figuring out who needed to be at the table for those conversations. And so who needed to be at the table from DCF, DJJ, Agency for Persons with Disabilities, etc. So we pretty much solidified our teams and their roles, and we started getting cases referred. And so as we were working through them, they were often situations with families in crisis who have struggled to get services. Oftentimes these were community children, so not always children in foster care. And we were seeing a lot of good work coming out of these teams. Situations that we thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do for this family? How are we going to try to keep the child out of foster care and with their family? And, cases were coming along and families were starting to get connected. And it was just a really beautiful thing to see. So what happens? Word gets out, right? And so we started getting increased referrals to these staffing teams, which is great. We enjoy the work of being able to truly help families and seeing all the collaboration that was going on. However, realistically, it really brought the attention to another problem, which is Why do cases have to come to a local review team to get help? That should not have to be the case. We should be able to, people should be able to be connected to services. And it really uncovered the issue of service navigation. And I think even us, and I can tell you in my 20 years with DCF, there were times that I'm like, good God, what do we have to do to get help for this family? So I think those who have been and worked in this system, we've felt that way. We've seen it through our caseworks. And, no doubt families are frustrated, especially if they're in crisis. And so we realized service navigation and teaching folks how to do that on the front lines is super important. So we sat back and process mapped out what is it that we are doing on every case to help the family, to help the child. And it came back to 5 steps. And so really, if we're going to sum up our training today and we're going to sum up, what are the questions we want to be asking? These are the 5 questions. So we always look at health insurance first. And that was really a pivotal mind shift for us, because I think for many of us, especially working in the social service arena in child welfare, we have our favorite resource guides, right? You saw a resource guide a couple slides back. If I was to hand that resource guide to a family and say, who's in crisis, and say, here are some services, you can pick off some of these. Where would you start on that list? Which link would you click first? So while we have and know our favorite resources, I would really object to just merely handing out resource guides to family or even a resource sheet. Because as Christy mentioned, what happens? The family will call the first one and they'll say, oh, we have a wait list. The second one, maybe it still exists. The third one, oh, we don't take your insurance. And so, even if we can get them to call the third one, they're over it. And so what we have learned is that we want to start with our health plans. And I venture to say this, that most of us, when we think of substance abuse and mental health, we don't necessarily think about our health plan first. We think about our local Baker Act facility or community mental health center. We think about, what's in our local community. We don't necessarily think about the health plan. Whereas if it was a medical issue and we had, you had woke up in the middle of the night with your ear pounding, you probably would be looking for your health insurance card and trying to figure out where you could go. So we want to, again, look at this mind shift and really thought process shift of when we think about mental health and substance abuse, that we turn to our health plans. And so we'll go a little bit more in depth on that in just a minute. But these are the 5 questions, health insurance, looking at mental and behavioral health needs. What of the child? What are their specific needs and challenges? What were the effectiveness of prior interventions and transition services supposed to look like? Which systems are involved with this family or should be involved? And then who is the champion that is going to be providing help with the coordinating among the different players on the team? And then does it rise to needing a team staffing? A lot of these steps can be done on boots on the ground. And again, that's why we're here today, is to teach this method. And then if it's beyond that, if it's a super complex situation, there may be a need to bring it to some sort of staffing team to help work together on it. So we, like I mentioned before, mapped out the process. There are a couple worksheets that you will be provided today from today's training. We developed 2 different ones that are available for you. One is for what we call community children, those that are not in foster care. And then we have a modified version for our foster care children. So in general, again, the 5 steps are laid out here. and starting with the health plan. So we're going to start with step one. The first question we always like to ask our families whenever we're working on complex youth is, what health insurance plan does the child have? Now, for children in foster care, they will have the Sunshine Health Child Welfare Plan. So we know that one. But maybe you come across a family that had closed out to permanent guardianship and they don't have open dependency anymore, or they might be a post-adoptive family that reaches out. And so really looking at what health plan does the child have. So for purposes of this training, we are going to focus on Medicaid plans. And one of the biggest things that you should know about our Medicaid plans is that they have behavioral health coordination embedded within the health plans, as well as nursing care coordination. And so any member on a Medicaid plan is, if they need that level of assistance, they can call their health plan to ask for that case management to assist them. And so that is available in all of the Medicaid plans. Now, private insurance, just as a side note, they also have case management available within the health plan. They operate a little differently. They may be called something different from plan to plan in the commercial insurance plans, but they do have that available too. But for children in with Medicaid, it's called BHC, Behavioral Health Coordination. And so getting that individual involved as early as possible is critical. So let's talk about why. So let's think about too, if we have a family or a child that lives, let's say, in Pensacola, and then they relocate down to Marion County, it's likely that the folks up in Pensacola are not going to know what services are available down in Marion. And so if we are working with our health plan, they know their providers that are in network with that health plan. And so we do not have to be the subject matter experts to find up all the resources and dig them all up. We need to partner up with the health plan just to make sure that they're able to look in their network and help get that child connected quickly. It's important to know that families, and I'm going to speak on community children right now, families in the community, when they are deemed eligible for Medicaid, because DCF determines eligibility, then it goes over to Agency for Healthcare Administration, who administers and puts them in a health plan. So families are able to choose their Medicaid plan. They get assigned one, but they have so many days to change it. And so if the plan that they're in is not appropriate or not meeting their needs, they can call choice counseling to have it changed. And so just be aware that there are some specialty benefits available for children with special needs. For instance, children's medical services is a specialty level of benefit. And so if they have some sort of life-altering condition, it could be asthma that they need to carry an inhaler, they may be eligible for a specialty plan. If it's mental health needs, they may be eligible for some type of specialty benefit plan. And so while most of our children in foster care are on the Sunshine Health Child Welfare Plan, they could end up on one of those specialty plans. So getting that case manager within the health plan to be part of the service planning as early as possible is very important. The other thing that we want to look at is who is the child's primary care doctor, and why is that important? Because oftentimes children with complex needs, they're going to need referrals and for other services. And so looking at, is this child connected to primary care? Now, I know for children with high needs that are in the foster care system, they may experience a lot of placement disruptions, and they may be moving from place to place. And we had one child on a case where they hadn't been to a primary care doctor in over a year. And so we have to, in those situations, get creative and say, what doctor do we have available to us? Are we working with a doctor from the Baker Act facility, or can we partner up with the psychiatrist to help get referrals? So really looking at which doctor is the child seeing? Do they have one? Making sure we can tie them to one so that we're able to help to get referrals. So again, first step, and really we ask for you to be thinking about this in your scope of work, is, are we connected to the health plan? Are we connected to that behavioral health coordinator or nursing care coordinator if the child needs it? Now, the other thing I want to say, just as a side note as well, is this also applies to parents. So parents that have Medicaid are also able to take advantage of behavioral health coordination and nursing care coordination. So we know that many parents in the dependency system may be struggling with mental health or substance use needs. And so they are able to contact their Medicaid plan and ask for help, and ask for that behavioral health coordination to help get them into providers to address their unmet needs. So while our focus today is mainly on children, I do want to point that out, that parents can get that assistance as well. So Medicaid, we're going to talk about Medicaid in general for a few slides here. So Medicaid did some changes that they launched February 2025 of this year, which they're calling Medicaid 3.0. And so I'm going to pull up a handout real quick. So this is a snapshot of Medicaid 3.0. And basically, their focus now is really looking at families a little bit more holistically. They also have some support through their Hope Florida navigation. They are also looking at enhanced ways to coordinate care and integrating specialty benefits for those that need it. The other thing that Medicaid did was they went from numbered regions to lettered regions. So where my home base, one of my counties is Marion County. I think it used to be Medicaid Region 3, and now it's B as in boy. And so they reassigned their Medicaid regions to letters. You'll see some of that there. And why is that important? Because they also streamlined some of the health plans that are available in those regions. They consolidated. And so you see here on the left which health plans are in which lettered regions. Like I said, for the most part, our foster care children have Sunshine Health, which is available across the state. So this is just again, a nice little cheat sheet that kind of gives you a background on the Medicaid system and services. So an important thing to know about Florida Medicaid is that all of the Medicaid plans have what's called minimum covered services. And so what that means is every Medicaid plan across the state, regardless of whichever one someone is in, they all have these minimum covered services. So well child visits, getting prescription drugs, mental health and substance abuse treatment, etc., is available in every single Medicaid plan. So the other thing I want to point out that you may see there is that transportation is listed. So yes, transportation is a minimum covered service. So again, available in every health plan. And that is also, we know, a big need for some of our parents. And again, if they have Medicaid they may be able to contact their Medicaid plan to ask with transportation to their treatment or evaluations, so they can get that assistance through their health plan. I do want to point out, we list a website up there too. It's that flmedicaidmanagedcare.com. If you want to visit that site, it has a lot of great information about the Medicaid plans. It also has a link to some of their brochures that go a little deeper into some explanations on the different benefits. So for our purposes, minimum covered services, we're going to talk about a federal law that is part of Medicaid. It's called EPSDT. Some of you may have heard about it. It's that early periodic screening, diagnostic, and treatment. So again, it's a federal law that pretty much the summary says the purpose is to ensure that children receive detection and are diagnosed as early as possible and treated before an issue becomes a permanent lifelong disability. And so that's the gist of the federal law. We know this more as a well child check, or even the 72-hour screening that's done when a child comes into foster care. So it's based on a periodicity. We know that children get well checks, I think it's like at 2 weeks after birth, and I forget, my kids are older. Then they get them annually as the children get bigger. And again, very critical that we want to, have children, if they're having issues, we want them diagnosed as early as possible and treated. So basically what the federal law says is that there can be no caps on EPSD services. So if there is something detected during these checkups, and the child has a diagnosis and the doctor writes a treatment referral, that those services cannot be limited. Now, the doctor may have to reauthorize stuff, but they cannot be capped. And so that's really important, because if we think about health insurance in general, and again, this is, life skills for us as well. We know maybe our health plan, if we say, targeted case management for mental health for a child, or in general, you get 21 units available under the plan, right? 21 units in a year of a service. If the child is diagnosed with something, and a child is defined 0 to 21 years old. So if they're diagnosed, they can go beyond the 21 units a year that are needed. So very important federal protection. Very important also to remember that child is defined under the age of 21. So even our 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, they are still protected and have the EPSDT protection. All right, and part of minimum covered services under our Medicaid plans includes substance abuse and mental health treatment. These are some of the ones that are used very frequently, which again, targeted case management, assessments and evaluations, making sure they have access to therapy and higher levels of care if needed, such as residential treatment or SIP services. So they're all available in any health plan under Medicaid. So another concept we want to go over that impacts access to services is medical necessity and prior authorization. So medical necessity is working with your medical provider or your doctor. They're deeming something or a service medically necessary, right? So if a child has extreme behaviors, child has low functioning, doctor says, I'm going to refer this child to ABA because it's medically necessary, due to his conditions and diagnoses. Then what happens is that referral will go over to the insurance for prior authorization, and the insurance will review it and say, we agree, we're going to go ahead and authorize the services. So these two components sometimes can be barriers and challenges to our families when they're trying to access services. Number one, let alone getting the referral from the doctor, or the doctor understanding why, we're asking for a particular service. And then sometimes we can run into issues with insurances as to the authorization, especially if it's for a higher level of care. The insurance may want to know what has been done prior to looking at a higher level of care. And so some of our families can get tripped up along this way. Again, I go back to that is why it's really important that we partner up with our health plans and we work with our behavioral health coordinators through the Medicaid plans. They can help a little bit with navigating through some of this. They can call the doctor's office and explain the need and reason for the referrals that we're asking for, and help navigate a little bit of that process. They can keep an eye out for authorizations in the systems and help explain to their utilization department why things are necessary and what else is going on. So that partnership with the health plan is really, really important and can sometimes help us overcome some of these challenges. Now, where the Medicaid plans all have the same minimum covered services that we showed a couple slides back, where they differ is when it comes to their expanded benefits. So expanded benefits are what health plans choose to offer. So they can offer all kinds of extra services. And I'm going to show you an expanded benefit handout sheet. That's that website that I pointed out a couple slides back, that Excel Medicaid Managed Care site, does have this document, and you can drill down to your county. So it,
And I did put it in the link. I did put the link into the chat. Just if if individuals wanted to check it out, you can sort by county in your area to see exactly what is available and what are those expanded benefits. So I did put the link in the chat. Sorry.
Thank you, Christy. Appreciate that. So here's an example of some of the expanded benefits. We have our health plans listed up here at the top. I hope you can see this. I know it's probably a little small on your screen. So we do have some health plans that offer child enrichment assistance, which could include after-school activity stipends and camp scholarships. We have some plans that offer home-delivered meals. And that really helps out. We had a family one time where the house burned down and they had to relocate to a hotel. And so the health plan was able to deliver home meals over to that hotel for help. We have several plans that offer non-emergency transportation trips. I heard one health plan on a staffing said to the parent, hey, we can do 3 transports that are non-medical related. And so again, I think about our families where transportation is a barrier, that may benefit the parent as well. They would be able to tap into some of their own expanded benefits through their Medicaid plans. The famous, I think, expanded benefit that most people know about is the over-the-counter benefit, where families can shop. I think it was increased to $50 in some plans, but it's between $25 and $50 a month. They can shop for items like Neosporium or diapers or wipes or a blood pressure cuff. Different things. They can shop in the health plan's catalog for those items monthly. And so we want to encourage our families to take advantage of that. And we also have things like swim lessons that are available through most of our health plans. So take a look at this. there are also health plans that provide car seats and portable cribs and baby monitors. And these are things that most families have no idea that is available to the families. And so it's also, I feel like, a really great engagement tool when we're working with families is, we can offer them things, free stuff. I always say free stuff is great. So anytime we can do that and, help them, enhance them, what they have access to. So take a look at this handout when you have a chance. Encourage the folks you work with to carry this around and check out what's available for them. Now, I do want to point out there is a section on page 2, and you'll see a little heading here. I'll see if I can make it bigger. It says expanded benefits for 21 and over. And you'll see under this, it's going to go into this next list of services, and you'll see that some of these don't have check marks here. So this is where the federal law comes into play. You'll see it says, again, expanded benefits for 21 and over. The reason why it says that is because if it's a child under 21 years of age, if the service is deemed medically necessary, then the Medicaid plan must provide the service regardless if it's a regular benefit they provide or not. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples of that. We know that in general, Medicaid does not cover braces unless what? That service is deemed medically necessary. And so if it is, then the health plan has to provide it. So let's look at a case with substance abuse and mental health. So we had an 8-year-old child who was receiving services from an intensive wraparound team. She had been getting those services for 9 months. They came to the meeting and they said, listen, we've been serving her for 9 months. We feel like she's reached maximum benefit with our team. We do believe, however, that she would benefit from art therapy. And I'm going to pick on a health plan. So I'm going to say, let's see, there's no check mark here. And I believe this is Aetna. Yep. Okay. So Aetna says, well, I'm sorry, that's not a benefit that we normally provide under our health plan. And in all fairness, the rep was new from the health plan. So we just went over, well, she's protected under federal law, under EPSDT. It's been deemed medically necessary by her treating psychiatrist, and they referred her to art therapy. Therefore, health plan, I'm sorry that it's not a regular service that you provide under your plan, but you are going to have to find a provider and provide the service. And they did. They found a provider in the community, and they were able to do what they call a single case agreement to get the child that service. And so, important to note, page 2 under the section, expanded benefits, even though there is not a check mark, because again, this section applies to 21 and over, right? If there's not a check mark for them, then, that applies to them. But for children, even though there's not a check mark, they still have access to these services. If a doctor has written a referral deeming it medically necessary, then the health plan will have to provide it. So that section is very important. Again, take a look at those handouts when you have a moment. Let's help educate our folks that we work alongside with, and even our families. And I think, permanent guardians, post-adoptive families, they all need to know that about expanded benefits. So let's get into a case example. So let's go back to Jody. Gillis, would you like to read the situation?
Sure. Allegations. Jody was under a Baker Act, but it had expired this morning, and the caregiver refused to get her. She has been discharged from the ER, but is still waiting for someone to come get her. During the review of Jody's situation, the following additional information was obtained. The child has 25 Baker Acts at the last year in various CSU and emergency departments. Her medications were frequently changed during the Baker Act. The child's pediatrician has been the doctor who wrote the child's psychotropic medication orders. Recently, she has a script pending that is at the pharmacy that stated the child was not covered by that it was not covered by the child's health plan. She often has cuts on her arms and is swallowing objects. The child has stomach issues and was previously referred to a gastro doctor, but has not yet followed up. She has been diagnosed with PTSD, DMDD, and anxiety disorder. And so, again, looking back at the things that Joelle had spoken about, looking at, where are those gaps and where are those opportunities to be able to help this child. So what are the first questions that you would ask if you came across Jody or trying to help Jody? You would ask, does a child have health insurance? Who can consent to the services? Going back to the pediatrician prescribing the psychotropic medications, if I'm having, thinking about the needs for a specialty doctor, if I am having issues with my foot, there's times where you want to go to a specialist. I need to go see a podiatrist versus my primary care physician to be able to address those specific issues. So looking at the pediatrician prescribing the psychotropic medications, would it be better that a regular psychiatrist was seeing her, especially as it relates to the frequent medication changes? Going back to, does the child have a serious chronic health need or condition? And here we stated again that this child was referred to a gastro, so was referred to a specialized doctor because of the stomach issues. And don't forget, she was swallowing objects as well. And then who is a legal caretaker or legal guardian for the child to be able to contact their health plan? And again, who's the primary care physician and who is the psychiatrist as it relates to Jody?
Thank you. And, again, we're not going to know all the specialty providers available in the health plan. So partnering up with the health plan as early as possible on these cases, getting them involved to help us. It's like having another subject matter expert to help us find the providers quickly, help schedule and get appointments set up as well. And we also seen in this example, there is the child had a script for a medication that wasn't being filled. And so another thing to note is that our Medicaid plans have 24/7 nurse lines. And so those should be used if needed, for situations like that. The health plan is available to help us. The other thing I want to point out before we go to the next slide is we have a handout that you'll also receive. It's one that we share with families. Again, typically we work with families in the community, and so, but the concepts are still relevant here. And so, again, our guiding them to contacting their health plan and getting connected to that behavioral health coordination. But also, we've itemized out all of the Medicaid health plans and the direct phone numbers to behavioral health coordination within those health plans. So every Medicaid plan, they have what's called a member handbook. And so that member handbook delineates all of the services available in addition to these phone numbers. And so we go and we update these, annually, just like our health plans. Many of us, I know back in the day being with DCF, I would get my health plan book. I had a choice. Number one, which health plan did I want? I would, when I was with Blue Cross Blue Shield at the time, I would get this annual member handbook. And I did anything I did what any good lawyer would do. I set it on my counter and I said, I'm going to read this one day. And it sat there and then had stuff piled on top of it. And I found it 6 months later and go, you know what? I don't have time to read this. And it would go to the recycle bin. So I encourage you to read your own health insurance member handbooks to see what is all available. You might be surprised that some of our health plans come with expanded benefits themselves. So take a look at your book. Or nowadays they're posting them online. So I don't even know if we get books anymore. I haven't seen one in a minute. But with our Medicaid plans, they all have that behavioral health coordination number available. They have non-emergency transportation as well available, and the 24/7 nurse line. And so we want to encourage families to utilize that as needed. And we did try to list out some of the commercial insurances as well as we've come across them in the work that we do. And so that handout is available to you. And I think it's a really valuable handout, again, when we're closing out cases in dependency for permanent guardianship and our post-adoptive families. You know, I would really love to see them get a hold of that handout to help them through their journey and as their child develops in case things come up for that child.
And you know, I was to say, and even to add, again, when the families are in crisis, it's not necessarily the first thing that you think of. So being able to remind those family members about the health plan and the supports through the health plan, with the nurse care coordinators and or the behavioral health care coordinators, they can really step by step be able to help those children and those family navigate services, including if there's a specific thing that's needed in a referral, say it's home health, contacting the primary care physician, letting them know exactly what's needed in the referral. So it's a tool in the toolbox. We utilize them all of the time to be able to help the families that we're serving.
Yep, thank you. All right, so looking at steps 2 and 3. So intensity of mental and behavioral health services and past services and transitions. So these steps essentially go together. Step 2 is really looking at the child's specific needs and challenges. We know that services for a child that has a low IQ and maybe nonverbal are going to look different from a child that is, higher functioning and running away and using substances. So their services are going to be different. And so really we need to make sure we are, that children are properly evaluated, that we understand what their diagnoses are, and that we're tailoring their services to meet their needs. And we also know that children, mental health, they're going to need different services at different points in time. And a lot of times when children are referred to local review team staffings, we see that the services the child are receiving, they don't match the child's level of need. Children's needs are going to move up and down the continuum. Sometimes they may need higher services, and sometimes they may need lesser services. So we want to meet the children where they're at. Sorry, I'm hearing echoing. Somebody's unmuted. And so we want to meet children where they're at and where their need is. And they may move up and down that continuum. So the other thing that I want to point out is, if you remember, we talked about prior authorization with the health plans, and sometimes we can run into challenges there, especially when we're looking at higher levels of care for children. And I can't tell you how many times I hear, especially when we're working with community families, the parent will say, this child really needs to be in inpatient residential treatment. And, we have to kind of take a pause there and say, well, Maybe they do, but we really need to be looking at what has the child been provided. What lesser level services have been implemented for this child before we say that. And I will tell you, before insurance is going to authorize residential treatment, which typically costs $663 and some change per day, the insurance company is going to ask what has been done prior to this. Let me give you another example. And I think it's easier for us to understand this in the medical sense. Maybe some of us have been through this. I know I'm getting older, so things are falling apart. And I was having problems with my shoulder. And so what happens? Where do I start with my treatment and care? I went to my primary care doctor, and my primary care doctor said, well, I'm going to do what? They evaluated me, they sent me for an x-ray, and then they referred me to a specialist, right? So I went along that journey. I go to the specialist. Specialist says, well, I'm going to give you a steroid pack, and I'm going to, take, some ibuprofen, see if that helps you. So right now I'm working at the level of outpatient treatment. I come back a few weeks later, I'm like, doc, not working. I'm still in a lot of pain. My shoulder hurts. They say, okay, well, I'm going to send you to physical therapy. So now I'm working my way up to intensive outpatient treatment. And then I go do that, and I say, I get an MRI, and they're like, oh, wait, you have a torn rotator, straight to surgery. So there is a process to get to higher levels of services. We don't just walk into surgery, just like we don't just walk into residential treatment. We really need to make sure we are exhausting lesser levels of services and looking at getting creative. A lot of our kids do not fit in a box. We can't just say, hey, meet them here and do therapy. No, we have a child who may be bouncing in different Baker Acts or different hospitals. And how do we help that situation? We can't even get this child to a doctor for referrals because the child has all these placement moves, or they're in detention. So we have to get creative with our service provision. Maybe we're working with our mobile response teams and our crisis intervention teams. Maybe we're engaging them while they're under a Baker Act, if possible. And, how are we connecting them to providers right when they're coming out and being discharged? So getting creative, looking at the resources. And again, we talked about resource inventories in our famous resource sheets. Those are good for us. We need to know what's out there in our communities. So resource guides have a place, and it's for us to know what is out there, and we should be connecting with those groups, but not handing them out to families. So when we think about levels of services, just being considerate to what's been done in the past. And the other thing that is important and goes along with that is records collection. If we have a child like we saw Jody with 25 Baker Acts, and we've got somebody saying, well, she needs to be in residential. Maybe she does, but let's see what we're doing to connect her beforehand. And the records collection is going to be very important because, again, insurance is going to want to review and see what has been done prior to. And so making sure we have the timeline on services and the timeline on these significant events is very important.
And something else I wanted to add to you in talking about those intensive services, including residential treatment. This is just an FYI to share. So children that are not in the foster care system, so still in not open to dependency, do have an opportunity to access residential treatment. They do not go through the suitability assessment process. They would have to have a recommendation from a psychiatrist and or a psychologist for that level of treatment. So just wanted to share that little tidbit of information in that kids don't have to come into care in order to get residential treatment. So, if you're hearing that, there's opportunities through the LRT. We can share that information with individuals. and with other stakeholders to let them know the process to access residential treatment for non-dependency children.
Right. And thank you, Christy, for sharing that, because when a child does come into care, it creates extra layers of protections that are great for the child, right? We have processes, court hearings, for children to get into higher levels of care. But that is it. But it's not that the child has to come into care to get that service. They can absolutely get it in the community. And in fact, it's a lot quicker, and it's a lot of a more of a simpler process to do so. So when kids come into foster care, things get complicated. There's a lot more hands in the pot. And so even when we have some of these children that we consider lockout children, and it really is the failure of getting mental health services for the child that leads to the foster care experience, we still try to look at these cases and say, how can we help and get that child into the right level of care that they need? Maybe that dependency case can be dismissed. So we still try to work on that, even if the child does come into care. But important to know they don't have to come into care to get that. All right. So Gillis, would you like to read our example further?
Okay, sorry. Service navigation for Jody. Jody was under a Baker Act, but it expired in the morning and the caregiver refused to come get her. She's been discharged from the ER, but is still waiting for someone to get her. During the review of Jody's situation, the following additional information was obtained. The child has 25 Baker Acts in the last year. Her medications were frequently changed during the Baker Acts. She often cuts her arm and swallows objects. She has been diagnosed with PTSD, DMDD, and anxiety disorder. Jody attends an alternative school, but does not attend regularly. Jody has IQ testing with a full-scale IQ of 69. Jody was referred to counseling, but has not attended any sessions. She has been to several crisis emergency shelters for placement over the last year. So again, thinking about Jody, thinking about service navigation, what are some of the things that we look at in regards to her case? The intensity of mental health and behavioral health services. It looks like she's been referred to counseling, but hasn't attended. But there may be a reason why she hasn't attended those services, because she continues to be in and out of the Baker Act facilities. And then what are past services that she has received? Have there been any school interventions? But as stated in the notes right there, she hasn't been attending school regularly. Is there any prior counseling services, in-home services? Thinking back to Jody a couple of years ago, she had been referred to some specialized trauma counseling services, but we need to look at, did she attend any of those services back then, as well as what's being done recently? And then what are some of Jody's needs right now when we're looking at Jody, and how can we help put in services to be able to stabilize her? Going back to even in point 2, are there specific needs that Jody has? We now also have some IQ testing with a full-scale IQ of 69. We talked about, again, some of those medical issues related to her stomach. Has she been to the specialist in regards to that? Has she been running away? We look at, again, the frequent Baker Acts. What's going on around those Baker Acts? Is it home? Is it school? And then also, she's been in several emergency shelters over the past year. And what type of services and supports did she get there? Did she just go for a couple of days? Was she successful when she was at those emergency shelters, or was she discharged unsuccessfully?
Right. And so a lot of times folks may look at the situation and what's the statement going to be? It's going to be, this child needs to be in residential. And again, we want to put that on pause. Maybe she does, but let's back it up. Let's look at what has she had, what services have been provided to her. How did she do in those services? And, what are the Baker Acts recommending? Are we looking at what the discharge plans are telling us, as far as when she's discharged? Where did she get that 69 IQ? We want to understand, what doctor did that? Do we have a copy of that evaluation? Again, services for a child with a lower IQ are going to look different than a child with average or higher functionality. So we need to be very mindful of what her specific needs and challenges are, what her specific diagnoses are, and what services she's had in the past. We want to make sure we are timelining that out, because if she does ultimately need a higher level of care, we want to have those records in hand. We want to be able to have that packet sufficient so we don't stall in the need for residential if that's what she ultimately needs. All right, so step 4, we are looking at systems involvement. So looking at who else is at the table or who should be at the table. And so, and it's also important to understand that a lot of our systems, our agency systems, operate on continuums of services as well. For instance, not every child that comes into the DJJ system will end up in commitment. There is, a continuum of services that are provided to children depending on where they fall in that system. So certain evaluations and assessments may be available to children that are on intake status, whereas different services and assessments may be available to children on probation or in a commitment program. Just like, for instance, not every child enters the school system with an IEP. So again, there's a process for that. They may have different evaluations and services available to them depending on where they fall in that system's continuum. So just a theme to be thinking about when we are working with our different agencies. And really, it would be impossible. Well, I wouldn't say impossible, but overwhelming to put together a service manual on everything each child serving agency does. So what we did here on this part of the worksheet was put some kind of the little tricks of the trade, tidbits of what you would want to know if the child is involved in that system. On the worksheet, there is also links to different resources that may be available within that system. Important to know which assessments may be obtained in that system as well, and some additional tidbits and maybe connected resources as well. So again, we are not in this alone. And I think that's the other thing to remember, and that rings through this. We want to do our best on the front lines to help navigate these services as best we can. But when it gets to a level of complexity that necessitates teaming, we want to make sure we remember that where our systems have those teaming opportunities, we want to encourage that. Whether it's on the delinquency side, the different staffings that they do, they can invite other players to the table. So we want to make sure we're not operating in silos. So Gillis, do you want to read Jody's status?
Now Jody is 16 years old. She's currently residing in a foster care in a short-term placement, but they are on the fence about keeping her because of her behaviors. The child experienced 7 placement disruptions in the last 6 months due to aggressive behaviors and continued frequent Baker Acts. In one of her Baker Acts at the CSU, they also gave her a diagnosis of autism. In the current placement, the care manager must pick up the child daily at 7 a.m. and take her to school. But since she was suspended from school, the child goes to the case management office during the day. The placement allows her back at 8 p.m. Her grades are impacted by her Baker Acts as well as her skipping class. The child was suspended from school after getting arrested for battery on a school official. The child is able to do a DJJ diversion program, but she is not finished. However, 2 weeks ago, the child stole one of the prior foster parents' vehicles and took it for a joyride. The car was returned to the foster parent, not damaged. So, again, going back to what we originally spoke about, if we look, Jody is getting deeper into, she's deeper into the foster care system. Now she's getting into the DJJ system. We saw on the previous few slides ago the IQ of in the 60s, and now a CSU is giving a diagnosis of autism.
Right. And so I do want to point out here, and this is, an example, when we see children with a diagnosis of autism, one of the first things we want to understand is where and what doctor diagnosed that child. We have seen situations of children where the parent, that they come out with that diagnosis, and therefore, the case manager or the parent or whoever, they repeat that for years. And they'll say the child's autistic, the child's autistic. And then we go back and say, well, where is the actual evaluation? We see it was a note on a Baker Act, or maybe it was even an IEP that had the exceptionality coded as autism. And so it's important to know that there is a difference between an educational label or category versus an actual medical diagnosis. And in order to officially and formally be diagnosed with autism, typically a child needs to have some sort of either ADOS testing, ADOS, GARS, GARS, or CARS, CARS. And so one of those evaluations, those are the most, I would say, accepted type of evaluations for autism. And so red flag, if we hear a diagnosis of autism, we want to understand where that came from. Why is that important? Because that child then may be eligible for other services through other agencies like Agency for Persons with Disability. And it's one of their categories for eligibility. But they are going to want a copy of the actual evaluation. And so we see this happen often. And a lot of times it's kids at 17 years old. And we're being told, oh, they've been diagnosed with autism back when they were 5, and we're looking for these evals. Maybe it's out of state. Maybe it's by a provider who doesn't even exist anymore. And so we scramble to try and get the child, an updated evaluation, or, maybe it came out of a school. We want to make sure children have that diagnosis, properly diagnosed medically. Again, working with our health plans, they can help us locate providers for that, even help schedule appointments. And we know the challenges with trying to get those evaluations quickly. Sometimes there's wait lists for some of that. So just be mindful of, diagnoses. Let's make sure we're seeing where, the evaluations, what doctors they're coming from. Let's encourage that records collection piece, so we're not scrambling right before a child is turning 18 to try and set the child up for success. This situation here now with Jody at 16, again, super challenging. We have multiple agencies involved, right? We have DCF foster care, we have delinquency involved, DJJ, we have the school involved, we have a health plan involved. So it gets very overwhelming very quickly. And I know our folks are exhausted. They're tired. Even our GALs, jumping in on this and helping sometimes with these situations, it gets exhausting. So when the cases are super complex, we just really encourage, participating in teaming models. And so does the lead agency, have an MDT staffing that they can, folks can be part of, and just really opportunities to team where we can. Even the school has staffings that, there may be teaming opportunities because no one agency is going to fix all of this. We're going to have to work together to make sure that services are coordinated. All right, so this is participation moment. So I am going to pull back up a poll, and I know this one should be good. So hopefully this one should not give you issues. Okay, so the first one, there's going to be two here. The first one is, which of the below are provided by Medicaid plans? Please select all that apply. And then we have one other poll. Thank you for participating in that. So just reiterating, all of our Medicaid plans have behavioral health coordination as well as nursing care coordination. Any member on a plan can call the health plan and request that. Even our parents can take advantage of those as well. Every plan has minimum covered services and 24/7 nurse lines. Transportation is a minimum covered service. The plans vary, depend on their expanded benefits. So the next quick, and I'll copy the link here for this if you're able to. What are the steps for service navigation? And I would just say as we presented them. So if you can put them in the order that we presented today. Right. Give you one more second on that. So if we go back to the service navigation model, and I just put it up there real quick, really we preach, the 5 steps. 1, start with the health plan. 2, look at intensity of mental and behavioral health services. 3, past services and transitions. 4, systems involvement. 5, who's the champion and what services are we linking? This is really what we've found that we are doing in every staffing that we hold. Sometimes it's not exactly in this order, but we really encourage to start with the health plan when trying to navigate services. And we're going to give another quick example of this. Christy, do you mind reading the example?
Child abuse investigation for 7-year-old MR. Allegations include MR has multiple bruises on the inside of both her upper thighs and injury to her hand. MR is nonverbal. She's not able to say how she got the injuries. The bruises are the size of finger bruises and they are dark in color. It is unknown how she got the bruises. MR does self-abuse by biting her wrist. MR lives with grandmother due to the mother not having stable housing. During the DCF investigation, the following information was obtained. Child is highly self-injurious and has frequent outbursts at school and at home. Family has trouble controlling the use behaviors and requires support services. Per the school, the child is language impaired and requires occupational and speech therapy each week. The child has Medicaid Sunshine Help. Per the school, the child has been referred to an endocrinologist and a psychiatrist. Child has multiple bites where the skin is draining and the back of her left hand, it is oozing. The child had ABA services in the home, but closed out due to multiple no-show appointments and cancellations. So number one, again, thinking back, what plan does what health plan does a child have? So in there in the note, you can see that she has Sunshine Health. Who is the legal caretaker to consent for services? So,
and in this case, this is a community child. She's not involved in foster care and she's living with grandmother. So is it the grandmother? Does grandmother have appropriate legal authority to make decisions and get this child into services? Does she have a power of attorney or some other document? Or are we working with mom on this one? So really, looking at the situation, sorry, Christy, to jump in. also, as Christy mentioned, starting again, this situation is very overwhelming. I think even just reading it, there's a lot going on here. I know our DCF child protection group, they're going to want to make sure safety is paramount, right? And so they're looking to see if the child's safe, but then how are we helping kind of connect this family to services? So, getting them connected with the health plan, helping them, the health plan can help them find those specialty providers that they need. We do not have to be the subject matter experts of who that is, or, how to get into their, how to get an appointment. Why were some of these services not in place, with the ABA? What are the challenges that the family has had if it's transportation? We know that that is a Medicaid benefit. So again, starting with the health plan is important. What doctor are they working with to help get referrals for services? The family should be able to work with the health plan on those items.
I also did put in the chat there, we were asking who is a legal custodian. There is a free public facing resource on Be Free Lake that families can use in order to get a power of attorney to be able to families be able to access services if it's a family made arrangement versus having that power of attorney. So it's a public facing page. So wanted to share some examples of teaming opportunities to consider. We've talked about missed opportunities earlier throughout the training, but just wanted to share that there is opportunities for you or the people that you worked with to be able to participate in some sort of staffing to ask some of these same questions and be able to get upstream to help families access services. So Department of Children and Families, we have Baker Act staffings. There's a multitude of MDT staffings that are held by both Department of Children and Families and lead agencies, child protection MDTs. Department of Juvenile Justice also has MDT staffing. So any child that is coming back from a commitment program, they have community reentry team meetings. There are commitment staffings, and then again, the dually involved youth staffing. So that's Department of Children and Families and Department of Juvenile Justice on those early identifications. Through school systems, there are threat assessment staffings, problem solving teams, and IEP meetings. And then to add to either medical, behavioral health, or other treatment team meetings. Anytime that someone is in the hospital or residential program, there are discharge planning meetings. So that can be behavioral health and or medical. And then through Agency for Persons with Disabilities, they have local review committees that look at their behavior or access to their services through Agency for Persons with Disabilities. So their level of care staffings. So just wanted to share those opportunities and just think about how you all may be able to have other opportunities besides a formal MDT staffing to be able to help that individual child and or family. So again, we spoke about the LRT staffings, and this is the framework around the LRT staffings. This came through, we spoke about earlier, social determinants of health and had a list of state agencies. Well, through the Florida Children's Cabinet, and as you can see on the right-hand side, those are all the agencies that are involved and participate in the Florida Children's Cabinet. So it's all the state serving agencies. And what they did is they agreed to come together for the local review team to be able to help individuals and help families navigate services. And all of us signed an interagency agreement. There was one, I think there was one that was signed. Joelle, you got to help me on some dates here from the original to the second.
2022 or so.
Correct. And then it was re-signed again in the past few years. But it's basically saying that we all agree that we will work together to help these families. So as you can see, and if you look, you can see see the progression of how a case gets to a local review team. So there might be some sort of lower level staffing. It could be even within your own agency. You may do a staffing that includes the caregiver to try to problem solve, to be able to help someone navigate services. And if that's not working, you can escalate it to some other sort of MDT type team. And again, we have the parent and caregiver because through local review team, we deal mostly with families not involved in the dependency system. So they include that parent or caregiver and that MDT staffing. If they're not able to resolve it, then it can be escalated to the local review team. And across every judicial circuit of the state, there is a local review team. That is something that is consistent across the state. They would staff that case. If they're not able to resolve it, then the case can be escalated up to the state review team, where we have those statewide representatives that can review the case. Some of the cases with complex needs, we just some quick examples. I had one in one area where we had a child that was going to maybe enter the foster care system, but we had a parent that lived in a foreign country that was non-offending. That's not something we can resolve locally. We tried to do a staffing and had to escalate that up to the statewide review team. So really those more complex cases are the ones that get evaluated by the state review team. So wanted to share some of our successes as it relates to local review teams. So this is some data from July 2023 to June 2024. We had 972 children that were referred to local review teams. The top referral sources were DCF or a lead agency, Department of Juvenile Justice, crisis stabilization units, and school districts. The average age was 14 years old. Let's go back and think about that. That's when those lockouts normally occur. 54% of the cases that we had that had been referred had no involvement with DCF at the time of the referral. So meaning that there is no open investigation or not, the child was not open to a lead agency. 83% were in the custody of their parent and 25% were those of post-adoption families. 61% of the cases had no involvement with DJJ, and only 5% of the cases that were referred were both open to foster care and DJJ at the Department of Juvenile Justice at the same time. 68% had a history of Baker Acts, and then 83% of those had Medicaid. And then the top challenges, and this is the statewide challenges, were due to violent, aggressive behaviors, trauma history, frequent Baker Act school disruption, or educational issues, runaway, and needed residential treatment. Now, as you can see, we had 972 cases that were referred, but we had 724 youth staff. There are times we're able to triage those cases, and it doesn't necessarily need a staffing, and we're able to help connect them to other services and supports. 92% of the youth staff were community youth, and the total number of staffings held were 1,662. So as you can see, most of the cases we staff more than once. It's not a one and done type staffing. 84% of the youth were ages 13 to 17. And then the top categories were behavioral health issues, severe mental health, and developmental disabilities, and APD. With those cases too, it can change by area to area, but it's those three, but maybe in a different order depending on the judicial circuit that you're in. We do have also, there's a link, and we can put that in the chat as well, that we have share on the DCF public facing page, the LRT data and the cost avoidance to that. So, and as you can see down at the bottom, we had 576 cases that we were able to divert from entering the foster care system. So most of the kids were able to divert, and 56 children did enter the foster care system. So that was only 9% of the cases that we staffed. And it was a total cost savings of over $28 million to the foster care system. So that's some of the data that we collect, and we update our information on the public facing well-being page of the Department of Children and Families, and you can look at information specific to each region and even circuit that you're in.
And really, point being is, things should not have to rise to a local review team for families to get services. Again, why we are having the training today, and we are so very happy that you took the time to participate today to learn some of the steps that can be done in lieu or even as early as possible when we're seeing children or working with families that have children in kindergarten that are struggling for services. Again, looking at getting families connected to their health plans as early as possible. Again, a lot of times when the case gets to the local review team staffing, it's when the house is burning down and the family is in crisis. And so we want to really work on early identification, teaching folks the best approach to help families get connected. And then on those cases where they are super complex, looking at what teaming opportunities are available to help that family.
Okay, we're winding down with Jody. So now Jody is 17 years old. She's currently in a foster home. Jody was able to have gene site testing for medications to see what medications would be most beneficial for the youth and able to have medications prescribed on a consistent basis. Caregivers and grandmother were able to receive specialized training, TBRI, trust-based relational intervention. Caregivers and grandmother were able to give information about the mobile response team to divert her from Baker Acts. Jody was connected to a targeted case manager that's certified to work with children and adults so that targeted case manager can remain with Jody after she turns 18 years old. Jody was able to participate in equine therapy services. She was also able to complete her community service hours at that same facility. Jody was able to attend an at-risk dropout program through the school that helps in positive community activities and vocational training. Jody's case was staffed on a monthly basis in order to ensure communication between stakeholders were working together on Jody's case across the system. So we've seen Jody from when she was young. I think she starts at 4 years old, now to Jody up to 17 years old. We've been able to look at Jody's case throughout this presentation of how she's weaved through those crisis services and interventions from deep end services and entering across a multitude of state agencies, but how Jody was able to connect with services to better be able to stabilize her. So now we have opened it up. We have time. We have a couple minutes for any sort of questions. If you want to post them in the chat or go live, we also have our information on here. Myself, Christy Gillis, the Circuit 7 CCDA, as well as Joelle from Circuit 5, and then Tina Morgan, who is one of our other counterparts that often do this training over in Circuit 9. Just be aware that there are facilitators for those local review teams in every judicial circuit throughout the state.
And also just a reminder, the concepts that we presented today, we were focused on children with high complexities and high needs. But the concept of the health plan is applicable to adults. It's applicable to mental health court, early childhood courts, some of our other special projects. Connecting with the health plan is critical when we are thinking about substance use and mental health. And so that is really the point we want to drive home, and hope that we were able to provide you some of those connections. We're happy to do any additional trainings. I know this was a lot of information that we covered today. We do offer a monthly training on MyFL Learn, which we can share out as well. If you want to come back, I know I've heard somebody say they learn something every time they hop on, which is great. And we want to continue to, improve what we're doing and the training that we're putting out to the community. So if you have any feedback for us, please provide that. And thank you, Kristen, and to the Florida Bar for this opportunity to do this training.
One other quick thing to add, where we're talking about those health plans, they will also do care coordination for the whole family if they're on the plan, if they're all on the same plan. So that's something so that the parents have that one point of contact. It can be, very overwhelming for individuals and for families when you have a caseworker that's coming in, you might have service providers that coming in, you have the guardian lineman that's coming in, you might have Department of Juvenile Justice that's coming in, and kind of knowing who can do what to be able to help the child, and help parents as well. But the health plans will do care coordination for the whole family. And I did add the My Florida Learn information in the chat there as well.
Joelle, this is Rick. Would you stop sharing your screen, and I will share the information for the CLE. That has the course number and the amount of hours, and it'll be available again. Give us a couple of weeks, and we'll put it on the Florida Bar website along with the attachments as well, and then forward it to DCF and the Guardian Ad Litem so that they can post it on their websites also.
Yes, and I posted the Legal Needs of Children Committee's link to our portion on the Florida Bar's website, so you can find it there. So just check our committee website in the next couple of weeks, and this recording will be posted there along with all of the attachments as a reminder and as a follow-up. So just give us a couple of weeks to get it edited and posted and put on there, and you'll be able to find this presentation along with all of the attachments. And we are so grateful for Joelle and Christy joining us today. I cannot thank you enough. I know how difficult these kids can be sometimes to staff and navigate the various systems and the resources available to them. So I really appreciate you joining us today. And like I said, we will post this on our committee's website in a couple of weeks, so you can check back there. And I work for the Guardian Ad Litem office. Our office will also post it on the Guardian Ad Litem Academy, and we will send it out to our committee members for their agencies to share on their training sites if they so choose to as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to having you at our next training. We do have several more trainings that our committee will be hosting over the next 2 months. So stay tuned for those invites and that information on a couple different topics, including Delinquency 101, and I believe one on human trafficking is coming up, Matt, if I'm incorrect, but I think it's human trafficking and Delinquency 101 and Delinquency 102.
Yep, we're still working on putting all those together. Thank you, Kristen, for all of your efforts, and for our presenters for being willing to share their expertise. And our committee as a whole is still dedicated to improving this knowledge base. So if anybody has any suggestions or requests for future trainings, please feel free to reach out to myself or Kristen or Rick. Thank you.